All right, and we are live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Honey Badger Radio. My name is Brian. I'm here with Allison, the boss at HBR, and this is another episode of I just maintaining frame. Seems to be pretty straightforward because that is what this is going to be about, right? This is
Mm-hmm.
the Mary
Mm-hmm.
Sue, essentially framing other people's conversations or other people's thoughts on men and masculinity.
Mm-hmm.
So this is Maintaining Frame number 28. Josh Hawley writes book on masculinity. The Mary Sue says, no, not like that. And we're going to be looking at an article from the Mary Sue. And you guys probably know the Mary Sue. They're one of our best friends in the internet.
Yeah. Well, just background on them.
Yeah.
Their editor, when I went to a convention, their editor decided that she didn't, or at the time, she decided that she didn't like me there and arranged with her collaborators to get me kicked out, and then published a whole bunch of provable lies about me on the Mary Sue. And then we sued them and lost. But you know how that goes. It just,
This, yeah, and Allison's status as a woman did not protect her.
No, it didn't,
No,
because the Mary Sue doesn't really care about women. It just
no.
cares about the influence and power that women bring them, that
It,
so-called advocating for women brings them. If you actually disagree with them as a woman, you will lose your V card faster than you could say internalized misogyny.
yeah.
But yeah, so that they're great people there, great people. And I just want to remind everyone to go to feedthebadger.com/justthetip and put a few shekels in the hat. It really helps out to make sure that we can keep the Badger Cave running. That's feedthebadger.com/justthetip. Please go there now. Send us a message, send us a few shekels, whatever. And we'll be sure to read your message out during the show.
Oh,
And
yeah.
back to you, Brian. Yeah.
Yeah, that reminds me. I got a super chow yesterday. I think it came right at the end, so I didn't see it. But I may as well read it now while it's on my mind so I don't forget. It's from a tip for $5, and a tip says, "Here's a small tip. Thanks for the show." Well, you know what? We don't discriminate small or large tips as long as you give it. They all offer their own kinds of pleasure. So, at least
Thank you.
that's what I've heard. That's what I'm told.
Not speaking from firsthand experience,
No,
secondhand.
no, yeah. Just
All right.
a little birdie
Okay.
told me. All right, so now let's take a look at today's article. So this is the Mary Sue. It's entitled, "Is there anything funnier than Josh Hawley writing a book about masculinity?"
Yeah, you guys writing a book about masculinity.
Yeah, exactly.
You could basically, if the Mary Sue wrote a book about masculinity, it would be everything evil about human beings is the fault of men.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, I just want to say something about Josh Hawley. So, he is, to my knowledge, the first politician, American politician at least, in recent memory that did a whole presentation, a whole speech about men and what men need, and like that the essentially he was calling for people to support men, and he went into a lot of issues that men face, and it seems like he's become I would say, like, to at least some degree, a pretty decent voice in at least getting people to look in the direction of men for essentially, like, as a problem to solve, or as something that we need to be paying attention to because
Or as people, human
yeah,
beings who have
yeah,
their own unique needs.
yeah, exactly. I mean, and I thought that I watched his speech and I thought it was pretty great. I mean, there was probably some stuff in there that I feel like he left out. Maybe I don't know if he brings up circumcision, for example, but that's okay. Like, the way I see it is there is a person and they have a significant voice and they have like some degree of interest in this subject. And to be frank, and I think this is why I think it's worthy of some credit or praise that I'm giving to Josh Hawley, it's not a popular thing for politicians to stand up for men. It's just not. It doesn't benefit
popular.
them.
Okay, Brian, popular. Okay,
Yeah.
I think that's understating it.
Yeah.
Like this is literally the first politician in living memory, probably the first politician in a generation. Like our parents and their parents that has ever advocated for anything to do with men in this patriarchy that has been constructed entirely for the benefit of men.
Yeah, sure. Well, I only said that I know of because I wasn't sure if maybe there was somebody in the 80s or
there's
like
I've
never
Men and Boys Party in the UK, but
yes, right.
I've never heard.
No.
And we are men's issues advocates. So if there was a politician that openly advocated or had any kind of platform related to the issues that we talk about, we would know. So in this patriarchy that's all about benefiting men and being structured so that all of men's issues are given priority over women's issues, this is like the first politician we've ever seen who ever even gave it any kind of thought. So yeah, I think the real problem here is that this individual is sort of giving lie to the entire superstructure. The emperor really does have clothes that the Mary Sue has constructed or is part of constructing. I mean, they're sort of a bit player in all of this, but they're part of an entire industry that has sprung up around this deliberate misconception of the relationship between the genders, that men would ever construct a society even to their equal benefit relative to women, like that they would say, okay, well, we should split all of the benefit down the middle rather than protecting and providing for women first. Like,
yeah,
it's contrary to men's instincts, it's contrary to men's socialization. It just doesn't make sense with human beings. It doesn't make sense with most social mammals to propose that they would, because usually what happens is if there is a pack or if there is a colony, it's because the males are providing for the females during the process of raising the offspring. So the colony and the pack exists to make sure resources go to the female.
Yeah.
Like, that's why they exist. That's why our society exists. That's why every society throughout history existed, to create a safe space for women to get pregnant, give birth, raise young. We're not that far from any other social mammal, and the funny irony is that we are even further down that evolutionary ladder, or whatever you want to call it, evolutionary niche, because human females aren't fertile unless they have an entire society's worth of resources going into them. And that people don't realize that human females are some of the most difficult. We're like almost like pandas. It seems like we're really fertile now, but that's only because of agricultural and highly productive societies. You take that away and we're all struggling again. And so it's like, this is just the most ridiculous misconception. And of course, the reason why it persists is because feminism exploits the very thing it says doesn't exist, which is men's unique care for women and unique desire to protect and provide for them. I mean, if that didn't exist, feminism wouldn't exist. If the world wasn't the exact opposite of what feminism says it is, feminism would have been done, and it wouldn't have even been conceived of. Okay.
So I like Josh Hawley because of that. And I think that
I went on a bit of a tangent.
No, it's okay. I think that he is at the very least moving in the correct direction. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because I think that it's worth your time. If you haven't seen it, look up. I guess I could have looked it up and just told you, but I think if you just look up Josh Hawley's speech on men, it'll probably come right up because he's done it and it was all over. And plus, and I think this is even, you know, more interesting, is that he polls really well and he's very popular with you know, like in many parts of the United States, you know. So this means, and this is another thing that I've also noticed coming out of like some religious YouTubers too, is they're coming to the same place, you know, where it's like, we got to help men, and there is a very serious problem that men need help with, and we have to support them. We need to like back them up, right? And
Yes.
yeah,
And
so
that's good to see.
it is. It's promising. I mean, that means that there's going to be conversations about this. So,
I mean, I would go. I mean, I'm probably a radical in a lot of ways. I would say that a lot of the Christian conversation about male sexuality was the door that all of this walked through. All of it. Like once you start demonizing male sexuality, you're automatically demonizing them as less moral than women. And you open that door and feminism walks through. And then after feminism walks through, all the extremism with LGBTQ and all of that other stuff walks through, and the extremist trans issues. Like, I mean, I would call myself a liberal, so I think that it's important that we have a society that judges people based on their character and not who they choose to love or what they look like. But I don't agree with a lot of the extremist stuff. And I think that what's empowering that extremist stuff is antipathy towards masculinity and towards recognizing the issues facing men. And if we had like 3 hours, I could explain the connection.
well, like I said, there's a lot of like inner. I'm just not infighting, but like there's debates going on within
that's great.
those religious circles about what you're saying. So I don't think that it's off the table, but I think that the main point is it doesn't really matter who's like dominating the conversation, because everyone involved in the conversation is thinking about what men need and how, you know, like what we can give them. So yeah, people are going to have different prescriptions, but it's okay because their intent is the same. And I think that that's like, I mean, I think that means the world, you know. It's not simply treating men as a resource that has stopped working and now they got to be like essentially bullied or pushed or you know, shamed into getting back to work. That it's not that, at least not where I'm looking. I'm sure you'll find that, you know, in places, but it's not where it matters, because those folks are just doing the same old song and dance, and it's not working. And that's not even like necessarily something that only conservatives do, because literally feminists do the same. They basically just want men to keep doing what they're doing, and they just don't want men to like get any gratitude for it. So
let me put it quite simply. The goodness in men is a function of their instincts as men, in my opinion, not ideology. So Christian men are good because they're men, not because they're Christian, you know, and that's going to offend a lot of people. You know, and I think that ideology can get in the way of the essential goodness of men. And, you know, in some ways, I would say that Christianity can shape and frame men's goodness, and it can expand our understanding of ourselves as moral agents, certainly. So don't get me wrong when I say that, but I think that the essential goodness of men is inherent. And it doesn't matter what particular ideology you are. I mean, to be honest, I've noticed that a lot of sketchy guys get drawn to virtue signaling ideologies like feminism. However, I think the vast majority of feminist men do it out of a desire to protect and provide for women, just like men have always done everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. They're just doing it under that framework. That's why they believe that framework that they're doing it under is actually what's best for women, Which is why
when
they
it's
believe that they're better men than men that don't
than
use
everyone
that.
else.
Yeah.
But it's the fact that they're men that gets them drawn to the framework in the first place. And that's what
Mm-hmm.
gives feminism its power, is that
Mm-hmm.
it's just a framework for telling men what women supposedly need, and it's
Yeah.
also telling women what they need, but telling men what supposedly women want from them. That's what gives feminism its power.
Yeah.
If you took away all of the rhetoric that appeals to men saving women, feminism would have nothing. I mean,
Right.
even when it celebrates women that have achieved anything, it's always in the context of, oh, she's done it against such horrendous odds. And if the woman pipes up and is like, well, but I had male mentors and men who helped me, like, shush, you handmaiden of the patriarchy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh
Uh,
man. Okay.
okay. I want to look a little briefly at what this book is. He has a little bit of a summary. It's not out yet. It comes out in, I guess, like 5 months or something like that. It can be pre-ordered. And it's entitled Manhood, the Masculine Virtues America Needs. Now, of course, he's going to be specific in addressing, like sort of directing this at America, because he is a senator, and his concern is with American men. But obviously, the same crises that American men are facing are being faced by men all over the world, because a lot of the world, most of the world, is basically going through similar challenges and trials. And
I would clarify one thing. I think that a lot of more traditional cultures, less Western, this would be a non-controversial statement.
oh, sure, absolutely. Notice the book's not out yet. Like it's not even close to being out yet, and it's already got an average review. It's got a 1-star review. They already hate it.
Of course.
Yeah.
They can't possibly accept that there's something outside of their cosmology.
Yeah. So I'll read the summary, and you're right about that, by the way. The especially like countries that are not as comfortable. I think that countries where people are too busy surviving and doing what's necessary, and everyone is cooperating, because if they don't, then they're screwed. They're not. Yeah, they're not worried about like manspreading. Like, they're not concerned with that. They're basically, so you probably don't, if somebody says, look, men need help, like everyone in those countries will be like, okay, let's help them, because without them we're screwed. Like, right?
Yeah, it's like one of the reasons why feminists will point to certain customs like feeding men first in violent areas, and it's like, well, guess what, we fed soldiers first during World War II in some ways.
Yeah.
Like, it's because they're the ones out front protecting you. You don't want
wouldn't we want them to be the healthiest, so that we could maybe
have
a chance
exactly.
at winning?
You don't want your protector, fainting from the hungries. And it's why in some cultures men walk first down the street, because they're expected to absorb the violence, and why women will carry the baggage. It's not because they're servants. It's because the man is expected to have his hands free to protect her.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's only when we've had these incredibly peaceful urban environments that all of that changed. Anyway, let's go.
All right. Overview. A free society that despises manhood will not remain free. The American founders believed that a republic depends on certain masculine virtues. Senator Josh Hawley thinks that they were right. In a bold new book, he calls on American men to stand up and embrace their God-given responsibility as husbands, fathers, and citizens. No republic has ever survived without men of character to defend what is just and true. Starting with the wisdom of the ancients, from the Greek and Roman philosophers to Jesus of Nazareth, and drawing on the lessons of American history, Hawley identifies the defining strengths of men, including responsibility, bravery, fidelity, and leadership. As Theodore Roosevelt declared, Teddy Roosevelt, in case you guys don't know, the very existence of the state depends on the character of its citizens. I am for business, but I am for manhood first. Hawley shows why the foolhardy assault on masculinity in education, the media, the workplace, and every level of government is an assault on freedom itself. Practical, down to earth, and urgent, manhood, the masculine virtues, America needs is required reading for every American patriot. Now, I mean, again, it's marketed at other conservatives, hence it uses some of this language like patriotism and America and all that. But I think that, like, based on the speech that he gave about masculinity and about men in America and all of their problems and all of their struggles and how he wants to, like, make that, you know, he's very concerned about fathers as well, by the way, and them having a rightful place in the family again. I would suspect that it is not harming the conversation for his book to exist. You know, I don't know how much of it I'll agree with or not, but based on what I've seen that he has said before in the past, I don't think that he's, like, not sympathetic to men's problems. And I think that it is likely some personal experience that he's probably had, maybe not him directly, but, you know, through people. And he's also been approached by men and even MRAs. I believe that Warren Farrell may have spoken to Josh Hawley at one point when Warren Farrell was going around talking to various candidates around 2016.
I wonder if Josh actually took some of his took some of his ideas as well from talking to him.
Well, at the time, Warren was promoting his Boy Crisis book. So I could see, like, I know that most of the time, if you go to, you know, politicians that are running for office and you ask them to, like, read your book and, you know, like, look at these issues, whatever, they're all going to say, yeah, they're all going to pay lip service, but very few will probably follow up. So I can't speak to that. Obviously, I don't know. But based on the things that he was saying in the speech, he's definitely, like, to some degree clued in on family courts, divorce courts, fatherlessness, and the criminality that rises from it, suicide, drug abuse, all of these issues that men have, he's mentioned. So it's not just like, we need strong men so we have strong country. It's more like, we need to help men so they can have more fulfilling, more meaningful lives, and then in turn we will all benefit. So it's like, you know, if we help men, they'll help everyone else. But I don't think it's just like that whole, like, you know, be strong man, you know. I don't think it's that, but
it's including the conversation about men's vulnerabilities and why men need some kind of framework to understand that their actions are improving society, or they aren't going to pursue those actions. You know, like this is the simple thing. And every society that's been successful has given men a framework, a clear framework of what actions to pursue to protect and provide for the women of the society and the society itself, how to be good men. And our society's decided, well, no, we're not going to do that. And usually that means we're going to fall off a cliff. And some of the things that I wanted to point out is throughout the Kufapedia, what are we going to call it? The Kufathon. Throughout the time of the Kufathon, there were people from the left, I don't even want to call them, from these sort of authoritarians who said that the fact that what people were pursuing was safety over freedom was actually a positive, because it was pursuing feminine virtues and removing masculine virtues from consideration when it comes to public life. So we are going to, they were thinking that rearranging public life around people's fears for their safety was a good thing, because it was promoting feminine virtues. So the other side of this is that Josh, what's his last name again?
Hawley
most likely saw that and recognized that, yes, the left says that we've been pursuing feminine virtues. It's a feminine virtue to put security ahead of freedom. But
Mm-hmm.
instead of saying that's a good thing, he's saying, well, maybe it's not a good thing to put security ahead of freedom. And the left, of course, gets upset, not because he's saying that putting security ahead of freedom is feminine, but he's saying that maybe it's not a good thing to be so tilted towards that we don't have the freedom to continue to pursue the activities that make us prosperous. Okay, so
Yeah.
I think that's where he's coming from. And
Yeah, I think so. He probably did see that because we all did. And I'm sure that he was against like mask mandates and vaccine mandates and other mandates that the basically the left were proposing, because they believe that if you do as you're told, you will be safe, which means you'll be free, because that's how they saw it.
yeah, and then that's like like Lindsay said, your wife said, women see freedom in terms of being safe from harm and from risk.
Mm-hmm.
They don't see freedom in terms of having the ability to act in as many ways as they can,
Yeah, yeah, because
they see it.
because that is risky, and
Yeah,
so
that is risky because the
yeah.
consequences of your actions may be negative. So the more freedom you have to act, the more potential negatives there are to your consequence to your actions.
Mm-hmm.
And so, there's that balance. And of course, the left will admit, at least in some circumstances, that for pursuing safety over freedom is feminine. But then they won't admit that pursuing freedom over safety
Is
is
masculine.
masculine
Yeah.
in a positive way. It can be masculine in a negative way, but not a positive way. So the
Right.
real
Right.
problem here is that he's advancing the notion that the masculine instinct towards freedom over safety. I mean, come on, who's going to argue that? I mean, let's just imagine, okay, somebody straps a rocket to their car. Is the driver male or female?
Yeah.
I mean, come on, we all know this. This is an obvious common sense observation about men and women's behavior. Women
Mm-hmm.
have a lower risk tolerance, men have a higher risk tolerance. Men seek out situations of freedom so that they can have adventure, and women seek out situations of safety and
Yep.
safe so that they can have inner journeys
And
and
it was
realize
only
themselves.
yeah, and it's only because men took those risks, and yeah, some of them were hurt, some of them died, but it was
Mm-hmm.
only because they did that we've been able to be a civilization as advanced as we are, because some guy, most likely, I mean, in most cases, some guy was like, I'm gonna see what happens when you put this in this compound in this other thing, or I'm gonna try and split the atom. I don't know what's gonna happen, and eventually they nail it. So and now we all benefit because some men were willing to take the risk. Some men, like the Wright brothers, right? They built a plane, and we would never have thought like humans could fly. But
Mm-hmm.
because those guys, and probably a bunch of guys before them, took a bunch of risks, and some of them probably died as they were trying to perfect this machine, eventually someone nailed it. So it's actually, and of course now, airplanes are like, or jets or whatever, liners, they're very comfortable. They can
Mm-hmm.
take you anywhere. You can go there very quickly. So it's only because of that. And yeah, that means somebody had to take a risk. So all right, but anyway, let's
Well,
go. Oh,
let me
go ahead.
just say one last thing. I find
Sure,
it
sure.
hilarious, the feminist framework around risk, because
Mm-hmm.
it's always framed in such a way that men provide something for women, or men are excluding women from things. Well, you realize that the place where all this innovation happens is a world that nobody is excluded from. Nobody's
Yeah,
excluded from something that doesn't exist yet.
yeah,
Men can't exclude you from something that doesn't exist until you make it, by definition. And yet the feminist framework is so constricted and confining, the mental corset that they shove themselves in like sausage dogs in like a tube, that it can't conceive of the fact that there exists something outside of the purview and the grace of men, which is really
mm-hmm.
ironic. Which is really ironic because feminism bills itself as being something for women, and
Yeah.
yet it still sees women's world as contained within men's on a fundamental level. And I mean, that's not completely wrong.
Yeah. Speaking of, so somebody in the chat asked about whether or not he's gonna criticize feminism in his book. I don't know, because I don't know like how bad for your campaign criticizing feminism is. I don't think it's that bad though, honestly. But I don't know if he does that, because like if he needs to spend any time talking about feminism in his book, then he's not really talking about men, unless he's trying to explain why there are so many systemic problems with men, which are byproducts of, you know, the feminist influence on policy and things like that. But here's another thing though, just another little white pill. I talked about this on the last um I talked about this on the Badger Lodge on Friday,
Oh, okay.
where
I was gonna say fireside chat, but
no. Where I was reading an article from Time Magazine that was talking about how they were lamenting the rise of anti-feminism in Asian cultures, but especially in South Korea, because they just elected like a new South Korean president, and according to Time Magazine, he's like an anti-feminist, and that's kind of amazing, because it's one thing to be like, I want to advocate for men's issues. I think men need help, you know, like even Trump talked about that, and Betsy is it Betsy DeVos was his education person that like removed the Dear Colleague letter. So obviously they were making some moves. It's one thing to want to do that, and that of course upsets feminists, because they don't want that at all. But to actually run on a platform of being anti-feminist and then win, that's kind of awesome, assuming that Time Magazine isn't exaggerating you know, like his position on that. So because we don't know, right? But I just wanted to point out that I think that there is a rising anti-feminist sentiment amongst people, and it's not just in the sort of political space, but I think it's sort of just on the internet. You can see it, and of course a lot of feminists are now coming out to do damage control to try and essentially separate themselves from what they would describe as the radicals, while they try to bill themselves as like moderates or sensible or what have you, which means that they're going to basically make sure it doesn't die. I saw an interview that Benjamin Boyce did with one such feminist, and she was very soft-spoken and very like, you know, she was like, it was like a Laura Bates, you know, kind of person. And of course her whole thing was the main goal was to sell the idea that no matter what happens, feminism is still a good thing and we should keep it, and because otherwise she doesn't have a job. So just pointing out
put
that
it this way.
Okay.
All right. No matter how soft-spoken or moderate you think you are, once you embrace the notion that men would ever construct a society for their own benefit at the expense of women, you have embraced an extreme and vicious lie about human nature. And it's wrong. It's just wrong.
It's just absolutely wrong.
It is as wrong as the four humors not washing your, like, surgeons not washing their hands between surgeries in like the 1800s. You know, it's I don't want to say leeches anymore, because leeches are making a comeback, but you know, it's wrong in the ways of all kinds of bad science throughout history. It's not even science.
Yep.
The only reason it exists is because it is a tool to exploit that which it says doesn't exist. And it's you can't lie to yourself that much and expect, you can't construct society on a lie like that and expect it to continue to function. At some point the lie comes due, as we have seen in certain very public trials that have occurred recently. At some point the lie comes due, and when it comes due, boy, does it come due. All right. Sorry to interrupt.
No, it's okay. So we're going to go ahead and look at the Mary Sue article. I just wanted to set all that up. So look up Josh Hawley, and if there's a video, there should be a video out there if there's something that you think he should know about men's issues that he didn't bring up, I would say, if you could, be supportive and point it out, because I think that he's legitimately open to learning more about this issue. And I think the fact that as a politician he would make this like a primary thing to stand on, that is something that we should come out in support of, because we're not going to get this very frequently. But if it works out, then maybe more people that are involved in these things can also realize that, oh, you know what, speaking for men, it doesn't kill you, you know, your political career. It might even be useful. So, all right. Is there anything funnier than Josh Hawley writing a book about masculinity by Vivian Kane of the Mary Sue? They say
your commentary on it. It's going to be hilarious.
Yeah. They say, write what you know, but apparently no one ever gave Josh Hawley that advice, because the terrible Republican senator from Missouri is reportedly writing a new book about, and they put in quotes, masculinity.
Do you see we need a badum tish for a bad joke, because this is a snide jab at Hawley. She's saying that, well, Hawley doesn't have masculinity, so how could he possibly write a book on it? Mm-hmm. Well, you know, I would honestly say that you should keep yourself to your standard there, my dear, and throw out writings on masculinity by every woman who's ever written on masculinity who isn't herself in any way masculine, which would be almost every feminist who's written on masculinity.
Yep.
And just, you know, like the funny thing is that what's really interesting is that feminine individuals who, you know what, who don't really extend themselves to understand the masculine point of view, they think that masculinity is performative. So if they think that they're you know, angry, which
really like you crush beer cans on your forehead, you arm wrestle everyone.
And you're crass and you get in people. They think that that's masculinity, because in many cases, feminine individuals see personal expression in terms of performing and other people's opinions. They don't realize that true masculinity is about seeing how your actions in the greater world. It's not performative. It's explorative in a lot of ways. And it can be negative because, you know, it's not equally, but in its most extreme and deviant form, it's the serial killer killing. Although there are female serial killers too. They usually kill in a different context though. And in its most elevated form, it's, you know, Christ sacrificing himself for the world, for our sins, or the person who wrote the story, whatever. You know, that's the extreme ends. It's the extreme end of self-sacrifice in order to see that your actions affect a positive outcome in the world, or even just under the assumption that you completely identify with your actions. So it doesn't matter how you're treated. What matters is how you act in response to it. Or, you know, at the very extreme end, the very dark end, it's the serial killer. So, and then men, I think, are much closer to like the positive end of that in general. But it's that idea of your actions having consequences in the greater world, and you're drawn to see those consequences. And when it is adult masculinity, those consequences are seen in the context of making people more protected and more provided for. You know, if it's more of a juvenile masculinity, it might be in the context of going really fast.
Yeah. You know? Yeah. Sure. But it's still exploratory, as you say.
It's still exploratory.
Little boys, they want to see who jumps higher or who runs faster, or they want to see if they can climb that tree. But it's because they're exploring and they're exploring the world, but they're also exploring their own limits.
Yeah, and girls are more about performance and seeing how their performance or how their emotions influence the world around them. You know, and that's fine. Like, it's just two different ways of viewing the world. You know, and
they both have value too.
They're both necessary for a healthy society. But what I've noticed is that when feminine individuals talk about masculinity, they talk about it in feminine terms. So I'm saying that Take away all of the contribution to the conversation about masculinity that's contributed by women for the most part and by feminine individuals, and just get rid of it. Because that's what Vivian is saying here. If you don't have a legitimate perspective, if you're not masculine, you can't talk about masculinity. Well, Vivian, you just kicked yourself out of, you just undermined your own credibility here.
Yeah.
Because I highly doubt that you are a masculine individual. And if you play victim once in this article, that will be confirmed. All right, let's go.
Yeah. All right. So now, and of course, she is simply challenging, as we were saying in the beginning, the notion that Josh Hawley has any right to speak on masculinity because she knows that he doesn't have any. Which is weird.
Oh yeah, that
right?
too.
Yeah. So she's telling, she can gauge masculinity in people and therefore decide who has a right to talk about it.
And I bet she can't, even though she's saying that Hawley doesn't have any masculinity, I bet she can't identify anything actually positive about masculinity.
Right.
So she's simultaneously saying that he has no masculinity, but probably also is going to reserve the fact that he has toxic masculinity. But at the same time, there is no positive masculinity.
Right.
So this is the ramblings of someone who has no self-awareness.
Yeah.
And no logical consistency to her thoughts. So just bear that in mind as we continue.
All right. Now, obviously, masculinity is a multifaceted social construct. So there is no... So it's not just that Josh Hawley doesn't have it. It isn't real because it's a social construct.
Okay, what the hell are we talking about?
Masculinity doesn't even exist, guys. It doesn't. It's not even a thing.
It's a multifaceted social construct.
Yeah.
Okay, so since feminists basically have locked down the center of the chessboard when it comes to the common perception of male and female, you are constructing the social construct, and the social construct you're constructing is that men are to blame for everything and that masculinity is toxic. So the only way that men can differentiate themselves from women is to become horrible people. Congratulations, feminism. You are what you fight.
Oh, shit. That's considering how random all this seems to be. It's more like the center of the bingo card. But
you're right,
the free space.
The anything goes space.
Masculinity is a social construct. It's not real, but also it's toxic and bad. And also Josh Hawley doesn't have any of it. But if he did, it would be the bad, toxic kind. And
but there's no positive.
But he is bad and toxic, but it's not because of, masculinity. So now obviously masculinity is a multifaceted social construct, but Hawley's idea of the concept is not. It is rooted entirely in aggressive, brute force notions of, quote, manhood, end quote, which it just so happens is the title of his book.
Okay, stop right there. So the only thing we have now is the summary, right? Can we go back to the summary and could you read out the features of masculinity that he's looking at?
Starting with the wisdom of the ancients, from the Greek and Roman philosophers to Jesus of Nazareth, and drawing on the lessons of American history, Hawley identifies the defining strengths of men, including responsibility, bravery, fidelity, and leadership. Is that what...
Aggressive brute force notions of manhood. Okay, don't lie, obviously. And the thing is that the summary is all we got now.
Yeah, so the book's not out yet.
Vivian, you don't fart in our face and say it's rose water. Like, seriously. Oh no, this is the latest pooperay.
Yeah.
No, get your ass out of my face, Livian. I don't want to see it. This right here. You're lying your ass off about what this is.
Yeah.
All right, let's. This is what you want it to be, so you can discredit it.
Yeah, she's basically she's just making assumptions on, and of course, I don't. I think that feminists like this, they just hate the word manhood or masculinity or men. I think they do because it differentiates. In their mind, it differentiates them from the feminine, and they don't think that, I don't know what they really want, but it really seems like if somebody says, I want to watch this, I don't know, movie because I think it's pretty manly, they get so bent out of shape over it. They get like so upset. You don't have to like it. Like no one's making you, but it's like you don't want anyone else to like it either. All right. And given that the thing he's probably known best for at the moment is fleeing from violent protesters he pretended to support until he got scared, that's an exaggeration. You know, they're referring to January 6th, but it's not that important. Not really. His attempt to cash in, pretending to be.
I'm like looking at that video. This is very, very mellow fleeing. He also stops to have a conversation through it.
Yeah, he was just there at the time.
You know, I am not a conservative, and I criticize them too, but for the love of anything, could you please just keep your criticisms to something meaningful and substantive?
Well, that's just it. Like there is no desire for honest conversation. So we end up having to deal with all this like bullshit that is thrown in there to essentially cast people in the worst possible light, which is what they do. And I think that essentially like wanting to say, look, I don't want to talk about your hyperbolic interpretations of things. Just let's look at the truth and let's go from there. But it doesn't work because they don't like the truth. I mean, they like the narratives. So, given the thing, okay, anyway, his attempt to cash in, pretending to be an expert on his own warped version of masculinity is objectively hilarious. Now, in a way, though, she's also kind of shitting on masculinity, too, because she is measuring it by courage, because essentially she's saying, how can he know what manhood is when he ran away from angry protesters? Of course, that's not really what happened, but the point is she's trying to say that a real man wouldn't have done that, right?
A real man.
So
read the virtues again that were in Hawley's book. What was it? Responsibility,
bravery, fidelity, and
leadership. So what she's saying is he's not showing responsibility. This is what Vivian is literally saying. She's saying that Hawley is not showing responsibility, bravery, fidelity, and leadership in the face of fear. That's what she's accusing him of.
Yeah, and she's using it to discredit him as a man.
Masculinity.
Right. She's doing what women usually do. And then while claiming it's all a multifaceted social construct, she's still basically measuring his worth as a man based on masculine traits.
Masculine traits and virtues. So literally she's using his framework to judge him as a man. Yeah. This is what's so baffling to me.
Yeah.
This is what's so baffling to me. These people are exactly what they say that they are not. They say, oh, we're beyond gender. No, you're not.
No.
Masculinity is a social construct, and I'm going to turn around and judge men based on the factors that I am poo-pooing as a social construct. So what, you're contributing to the social construct here, Vivian? Well, then why are you calling someone out for doing that? If you're going to use it as a tool to manipulate men or to manipulate their sense of an identity, if you're going to identify those things as masculine virtues, as things you expect from men, apparently more than you expect from women, otherwise you wouldn't frame it in this way, and then he turns around and says, these are the masculine virtues I'm expected to uphold. Well, you just proved his point, Vivian. You just proved his point.
Yep.
Are you making the argument for this man? Because that's what you're doing right now.
Yeah, exactly. You can't accuse a man of not being a man and that man doesn't understand what it means to be a man, while simultaneously holding him to the same standards that he has on men. Right. So
he defines manhood with.
Yeah. So like
so it's like Vivian is kid. Let me just try this again. Vivian, he's saying a man is responsible, brave, fidelity, and what was the last one?
Fidelity, leadership, bravery, and responsibility. Yeah.
Responsibility, bravery, fidelity, and leadership. Okay. That's what he says a man is. And he says this is what masculinity is. And Vivian is saying he can't talk about masculinity. He doesn't know what masculinity is because it's because he's not showing bravery, responsibility, fidelity, and leadership.
Yeah. Exactly.
Why don't you spend a bit of time correcting your thinking and making it something coherent, and then come back, and maybe your essay will get something better than a D minus.
Yep.
Oh.
All right. So let's look at
Pretending to be an expert on his own warped vision of masculinity, which I share, by the way, is objectively hilarious. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ian. Your contribution is scintillating.
So I got a super chat from Senior Sticks for $2, and he says, cool. Feminism is freedom and masculinity is a prison. I think he's being sarcastic. Okay. I don't think he believes that. And that, I think, let me just check Rumble, because sometimes we get Rumble rants. All right. No, nothing else. So that's it for that. Guys. This
has been a quiet month.
Yeah, it's been a little quiet.
What are you guys doing? Like, are you just enjoying your summer?
They might be. I mean, we have some people watching. So, okay. So we got some tweets that she thought she would share. First, there's Ellie Mistel, who you guys may have seen on like the news. He's like this big guy with a giant gray afro, black guy. And he says, Josh Hawley writing a book on masculinity is like me writing a book of meditation and wellness, only if I was also a fascist. So,
Okay. Once again, Vivian has said, he has said bravery, responsibility, fidelity, and leadership. And Vivian has said, well, masculinity is bravery, responsibility, fidelity, and leadership. And you didn't show it during the January 6th riots. Therefore, how can you speak on it? And now she's tweeting this. Well, even if you say that if he's not showing masculinity, he certainly agrees with your perception of what masculinity is, Vivian.
Well, that's the funny thing too, is that essentially she's measuring the worth of a man speaking on masculinity by how masculine she thinks they are. Yeah. So, like that's another, like this guy, Ellie Mistel, he's participating. And there are plenty of men who have this thing where they're totally, self-flagellating, self-hating for whatever reason. Men, male feminists usually. I know that they're doing it because they're still doing most of the masculine things that Josh Hawley is talking about. They're still practicing, what is it again? Responsibility. So male feminists think that they're responsible for women's safety.
Yes.
And they act accordingly. Mm-hmm. Bravery, maybe like in a different way. Maybe they do it online.
Well, no, literally bravery. They're expected to jump out and save Yon Maiden Fair when she is being menaced by the Black Knight. I would counsel men, don't get involved. When you see a man and a woman getting into a fight in public, don't get involved. Maybe call the police if you think it's going to go really south, but for the most part, don't get involved. Because if you get it, this is what I have seen so many damn times. A man gets involved and immediately the couple turns on him, and the woman does something like, or the man does something like grabbing him while the woman stabs him or something horrific like that. So don't get involved. Call the police if you think it's going to get dangerous. But otherwise, don't play Jan Sabaho, because Ho is going to turn on you.
Yep.
For talking back to her man. Guaranteed.
Yeah. That's another skill that I think men should work on, is their ability to discern. But that means you have to be willing to be very critical of the people around you, and in particular women, because they will use your lack of discernment against you, and you will end up getting screwed by people that you probably should never have associated with, and it can color your future interactions with other women. So
I remember, and we'll go back to your point, because the overarching point of this is that feminist men also demonstrate these forms of masculinity. But I remember a story in which this man who was like, he was a good guy, right? He was obviously a white knight because he got involved in an altercation between a biker and his biker bitch. And it's like, why are you doing that? And what happened is the two of them stabbed him to death.
Jesus.
And you know, he's like flat out, he's the biker dude is probably flat out wailing on the woman. But here's the thing. Now a good guy is dead, his wife is widowed, and his children don't have a father. You know what, guys? You should have more responsibility to your family, to your wife, to your children than to some random woman in the street. Call the police if you think it's really going to get hairy, but don't get involved. Keep yourself safe for your family.
Yep.
Saving strange is not worth it. But anyway, let's get back to your overall point that feminists are also being brave, feminist men.
Yeah, feminist men are basically displaying the same qualities. And of course, feminists credit them for it because it's useful to them, but like it's not and there'll be the same guys who will basically try to criticize the masculine while behaving in the same way. It's just like when we
feminist men.
It's like when we were talking to Eric Anderson, and he was and he could not understand that what you were saying, which is essentially even men who behave in a more feminine way are doing that in order to because they have been told, or they, it's been put on them that being masculine is bad for women or homophobic. If they're doing it because they think it is the path forward. So they are still doing it to protect women. So it doesn't really matter, right? Like a man could like basically try to live as a gay man so that he never harms a woman, but he's still white knighting for women. It's it just isn't this, it doesn't express itself in the same way.
Okay, actually, we're gonna have to deal with the sound levels. I'm really sorry, guys. I had my thing all the way back. Is the sound levels back?
Yeah, no, it sounds good. It sounds a little different though. Like, you change mics?
No, I just moved my mic where it should have been. I just completely forgot. I apologize, guys. I am too much of a squirrel to be a proper podcaster.
Yeah.
But what I was going to say is, the point is that this is all masculinity. And what feminism has done is essentially captured men's drive to be responsible, to be brave, to have fidelity, and to lead women. Lead. Like literally, there's no way that the feminist construct in which women are incapable in every single circumstance of their life, that women can actually lead themselves out of that. Men literally the feminist construct is women are utterly incapable, period. Like utterly incapable. Men have to do it for them.
Yep.
So men have to be leaders. Men have to be brave. Men have to be responsible. Men have to have fidelity. And of course, that captures men's desire to be that because they're men. And that's a really powerful thing. I mean, when you capture that, you get all kinds of benefits as a group, as a society, as a nation. In fact, that's why nations exist, because they have captured that desire to be brave, to have fidelity, to express fidelity, to take responsibility. And what was the other one? Fidelity, responsibility, and lead in men. That's why nations exist. That's why human endeavor exists, because it captures that in men. And feminism has put its particular brand into the pot. The only issue with feminism is that simultaneous with capturing those qualities of men, it also destroys men mentally, many men mentally.
Yeah.
Because it's asking them to simultaneously attain a standard, but not have any recognition that they're attaining a standard higher than that of women, and not have any recognition that they have a right to a separate identity of worth, that, just a separate identity of worth. And at the end of the day, that creates utterly destroyed men. Like, it destroys men. It savages their psychology.
Yep.
Anyway.
All right. So I got another super chat from the DCV Titan, who gives us $5 Canadian and says, see a rando guy and girl about to fight. Proper response. Acquire popcorn and chair. Enjoy the show.
Okay.
I would, calling the cops is probably like
No,
a
I know
good
that's a
middle
joke. That's a
ground. No, I
joke.
know they're joking. I know, but I mean, like, you don't want to get stabbed to death by a biker and his girlfriend. So if in
Hmm.
lieu, if it looks like it's a situation that's probably not going to turn out really well, but you don't want to not do anything, I'm saying, you could call the cops. So,
Yeah, call the
um,
cops.
yeah, that's what I would do. Anyway, so we got another tweet from a feminist woman named Lindy Lee, and she says, "Hall ass Josh Hawley is writing a book called Manhood: The Masculine Virtues Americans Need."
Again, appealing to bravery as a masculine virtue, and in order to tell us all that Hawley can't talk about masculine virtues.
Yeah, yeah. Which apparently just writing a book like that seems to take some courage, by the way.
Yeah.
Um, Tucker Carlson did a documentary on the decline of masculinity. Yes, he did. It was like a couple of years ago. Madison Cawthorn urges American moms to raise monsters. I believe,
What?
yeah, I don't know this one, but I do remember we were looking at an article a while ago, maybe last week or something, where a feminist wrote a thing saying that, like, stay-at-home mothers raise monsters. And it might have been in response to this. The notion being that if you're a mom, not a single mom, because single moms they don't raise the kind of people that feminists would consider monsters. In fact, that I think that single motherhood benefits them. But they're talking about like a family arrangement where the father works and the mother raises the children at home. And what the article was trying to claim is that men who are, and it's only men, they don't mention girls at all, right? Men who grow up in homes where the mother is present, but she's, it's a two-parent home, but the father works, they're more likely to grow up carrying forward the same values that their parents are demonstrating for them by having this cooperative arrangement, which means that those men are going to be patriarchal because they're going to like probably be looking for a woman who would serve the same, purpose in the home that their mother did. And so I
And
think
that's
that
the monster?
yes, I think that's because it's perpetuating patriarchy.
Oh, for the
So
love of.
that's why that's what I think. I have to look up Madison
Oh, all
Cawthorn
right. All right.
to see,
Okay.
but
Yeah. Very few men are going to stop a woman from working if she wants to.
yeah.
Even if they were raised by a stay-at-home mom. So what is this? Like, really? Anyway, but also I noticed that Lindy Lee is also appealing to the very virtues that Hawley pointed out in his summary of his book
Yeah, it's the same
in
stuff.
order
Of course.
to judge. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, what is the argument between these people? Because it really seems to come down to these are actual masculine virtues, but Hawley isn't showing them, therefore he can't write about them.
Yeah,
But
we
we all
should.
agree that these are the masculine virtues, although somehow they're also social constructs. So why Hawley should be judged by social constructs, who knows?
Yeah.
Because she
Uh,
goes on to say it's always the weakest men who pretend to be the strongest. Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, of course. All right. So I'm gonna go, and so yeah, who is Lindy Lee? I mean, she's not even a blue check mark, but the author of this article thought her tweet was worth sharing,
Yeah, the
so she
Mary
did.
Sue is barely a blue check mark.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the blue check mark is really like a sign that you probably should avoid those people. But according to the Kansas City Star, Hawley's book titled "Manhood: The Masculine Virtues Americans Need" is based on a speech he gave at a conservative conference last year, in which he essentially blamed feminism and the left, a nebulous yet all-encompassing entity,
Like the
for
far right.
oh, no, it's okay when you say that. For all of men's problems. According to him, these things are to blame for driving men, quote, into the enclave of idleness and pornography and video games, end quote. Uh,
Okay, you're blaming men for constructing a patriarchy for the benefit of themselves over women. And you don't see how that would lead to men opting out of the system. Isn't that what you want? Like you're saying, men, you see that thing you're doing? it's bad for women. And the men are going, okay, well, I guess I'll stop contributing to society since that's bad for women. And as a man, I have powerful instincts to try to protect and provide for society. So you're telling me that it's bad to do this. So I think I'll just opt out and I'll do something else. Yep. And then you're like, oh, how can they blame us for that? How? Because you're telling men to do it.
Yeah.
Like, what's just men do that? Okay, I'll do that. Wow, this wasn't a good idea. How could you blame us for that? Like, because okay. All right, I'm gonna calm down. I'm going to reestablish chill, because this is just freaking ridiculous. Like, literally, you're telling men, your participation in society constructs a horrible patriarchy that oppresses women. So many men are opting out of doing so. And then you're like, well, why are they doing that? That isn't our fault.
Yeah,
well,
exactly.
Whose fault is it?
How can you blame us for it, even though we're the only ones putting this narrative out there? We're the only ones in a constant state of shaming men.
Yeah, for their participation in society.
But yeah, for just like existing. And like when young men are trying to figure out what women want from them, and half of the messaging is this shit, then yeah, it's no wonder that they're like, well, I'm just gonna go over here and watch some porno because those women don't hate me, and play some video games, because then I can actually
achieve.
Yeah, I can just like feel a sense of achievement over here, because now I'm not in anyone's way. And then when someone like Josh Hawley says this isn't good, because it isn't, like those men are not going to like be able to they're not going to be happy.
The taxes that you need to run your society.
Right. And they're also like, they're not going to make themselves happy. Like, they're not going to feel any real sense of accomplishment. So you want to help them so that they're not living that way, because it is self-destructive, And so Josh Hawley says, yeah, this isn't good. Men shouldn't be living this way, because there's so much more that they should be doing. But that means we have to let them into society and stop calling them monsters. And of course, they hate that.
No, because their narrative is excellent for manipulating men who have resources.
Yeah.
Like, that's the honest to God truth.
Sure.
This virtue signaling narrative fills up their coffers by manipulating men who actually have huge amounts of resources. It sacrifices the well-being of men who probably wouldn't ever be in the top echelon, but feminists don't care about those men. They don't have the filthy lucre that they're after, or their paws on the levers of power.
Yep.
Like, feminism is for patriarchs.
Yep.
This is for the most powerful men in society.
Yeah.
And the most wealthy men in society. It's not for the average man. The average man, he can go to hell. Who cares what happens to him?
Who cares? I mean, like, if he dies like alone in his apartment, it's just one less mouth to feed now. So, all right. So I got some super chats, and then I will keep going. Let me see. Senior Sticks gives us $2 and says, "Bad boys don't have to be brave or lead." Well, I don't know if I agree with that, honestly. I think bad boys are expected by women who date them to use violence to get what they want, and that puts them at risk. And you only have to look at, there have been a couple of incidents that have been like on viral videos of like women who got pissed off at a shop owner or a fast food restaurant employee or something like that, and then what they do is, they get really angry because they got to pay for barbecue sauce or something, and then they leave and they come back with their drug dealer boyfriend, and that guy ends up creating, either he gets violent and then she gets her way, so that requires from even those men that they be like risk averse enough that they're willing to do that just because she was angry and wanted revenge, or they get killed, which is the case as from the there was that Latino guy in New York who a woman sicked her boyfriend on because she wanted a bag of chips and her credit card was declined, and she got embarrassed but also got really angry and sent this guy, their boyfriend, after him, and the guy went back there and he regretted it. He died, like, because he went back there to be violent. So it's not just bad boys are also doing the same shit that good guys do. Like, they're basically being brave and they're demonstrating like their willingness to be violent in order to help or protect, or even if it's just protect the honor of their women. So I say this knowing, yes, it's wrong, violence bad, all of that, but this is the reality. Women use men as weapons against other people all the time. Some of them do it through violence, some of them don't. So yeah, I think that bad boys, and they do lead as well, but they do it like by pure fear and dominance, as opposed to, say, mutual respect. But it doesn't mean they're not doing it, and they're only gonna operate within the paradigm that the woman in the area is demanding. So if you don't want violent thugs, then women have to stop using violent thugs. And then the men will probably alter their behavior because they're going to want to do whatever the woman wants to do. So, anyway, so that's Senior Sticks. Next is the DCV Titan, who gives us $5 Canadian and says, "Who's joking? I think that should also be the response of the cops as well, rather than them risking taking flack and going to prison for doing their job."
Well, that's a good point now.
To each his own on that one, I guess. I'm just thinking, like, what is the most, like, what is a moral choice?
Yeah, they took the job.
Yeah, they did take the job. But I don't know. Like, I get it. I get the the sentiment, but I think that it's probably better to do the right thing. So Meredith G gives us $5 and says, "Doesn't Hawley demonstrate the virtues he is writing about by being a married father of 3?" Yeah, sure. I mean, well, that's the thing. Like, they don't want men to find themselves. They want them to constantly question their masculinity. If you keep them confused about what it means to be a man, and obviously feminists don't know, because they don't like it, right? Just in its essence, they don't like it. So they would prefer that men either never understand what it means to be a man, which is the whole, like, what even is a man? What is a woman type of thing? Because they want you to think that all of it is arbitrary and interchangeable, but it's not. So...
Yet at the same time, it's not arbitrary or interchangeable, because one is responsible for the evils of the world and one isn't.
Yeah, exactly.
Even though technically, if men are being forced to be evil, isn't that the worst kind of victimhood?
Mm-hmm.
Like you can't even compare to that. To be forced to do evil things against your will must be the absolute pinnacle of being a victim.
Yep.
And yet we can't talk about that, can we?
No, of course not.
I mean, that's the logical conclusion of toxic masculinity is a thing, but masculinity is also a social construct. Literally, men are being forced to be evil against their will. Well, then, if they're being forced to be evil against their will, then everything that they're forced to do, they're also a victim of. And they're also a victim of being forced to do it, that women are not. So even according to your framework, feminists, men are the bigger victims. When are we going to talk about that?
All right. After years of being told they are the problem, that their manhood is the problem. Why? And I think this is a quote from Josh Hawley's. I kind of remember that. Why would men not turn to these things? Hawley asks. A major thought line of Hawley's speech is the inability to separate masculinity from toxic masculinity, which he, of course, doesn't even believe is real. That means...
Stop.
Okay.
Vivian, Name
Huh?
one positive masculine trait that you associate with men in the same way that you associate toxic traits. One. You can't do it. That's because you only associate toxic traits with masculinity. Well, actually, you know what? What's really interesting is in this particular psychology that she's presenting here, simultaneously with saying that she can judge Hawley based on masculine virtues like bravery, responsibility, fidelity, and leadership. She essentially says that those virtues are only associated with men because of a social construct. And while she can judge him for them, she doesn't believe that they're inherent to masculinity. But she also doesn't associate positive virtues with masculinity in the same way that she associates negative virtues with masculinity, or negative virtues are associated with masculinity. So it's this is some seriously confused thinking. She basically wants it to have it both ways at the same time.
Yeah, she wants to be able to say masculinity doesn't really exist, but bad masculinity does. Yeah.
But bad masculinity does. And that's a social construct. But we can't talk about how if men are being forced to be villains, that actually makes them twice the victim of women.
Yep.
Yeah. And then who's doing the forcing? If it's other men, then you are blaming men. If it's, I don't know, the society monster, then we're right back at men are being forced to be villains, which means that they're victims of everything that they're forced to do, plus they're victims of being forced to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So that makes them twice the victims of women, and yet you don't want to talk about that consequence of your own concept of men and women. But anyway, let's just get about that brass tacks. Vivian most likely can't identify a single positive thing that she would associate with masculinity in the same way that she associates toxic things with masculinity, even though subconsciously she is associating some very positive things with masculinity because she's judging Hawley by not having them.
Yeah.
But she she will associate positive things with masculinity when she can abuse a man by doing so. But she will not associate positive things with masculinity when she can abuse a man by doing so. What is the common denominator here?
Yeah. Well, I'm with you. All right. So she's quoting his speech, and you know the book's not out, so I guess this is all she has to go on. So anyway,
that means he sees all criticism of toxic masculinity as an attack on men.
Yeah,
men in general.
Well, that's
on men in general.
No.
Who's
wait.
men in general?
What do you mean? Oh, I see. That means because he doesn't separate masculinity from toxic masculinity, because he doesn't. Well, she doesn't. No, but she's accusing him of doing that, and he's basically saying that he doesn't agree with the notion of toxic masculinity at all, because it has no substance. It's just masculinity. They put the toxic in front because if you accept that, then you're basically accepting that all masculinity is toxic. Because essentially whenever they bring up what specific traits toxic masculinity has, it's just masculine traits. You know, competitiveness. Well, yeah. And then they leave things out, like cooperativeness, because, you know, team sports, for example, which is like the best example of the masculine operating at like a really high level, because these guys are coming together and they're collaborating and they're using their strengths to complement the weaknesses of other men on the team, and they're working together to win the game or whatever it is. And not only does that make all the men on their team better, but it also makes the opponents better because they're operating at the highest level of competition. And all the men in the game appreciate that, right? And it doesn't matter what the sport is, it's the same thing. But she can, like feminists, when they see the same thing that I just described, they only see the competitiveness. And they think that competitiveness is just bad. Like it's just toxic.
Yeah. and something occurred to me, and this is probably something I've said before. Feminism essentially appropriates for itself all of the positive qualities of masculinity. And it says feminism made men do that. Feminism made men care about women in the 70s. Before the 70s and feminism, men didn't care about women. Not at all. Men didn't care about women's opinions. Not at all. You know, and men didn't have good sportsmanship, or the concept of good sportsmanship. Not at all. Like, men didn't cooperate. Not at all. Not until feminism invented all of these positive traits. And it wants to appropriate for itself all of these positive traits in order to gain power over defining men. And it's like, so what this is Hawley has said, these are positive traits. He has said they are inherent to men, or more inherent to men than feminism is allowing. And feminists don't like that, because they want to attribute to feminism everything positive in men, if there is anything positive in men.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what essentially it is there's toxic masculinity, and then there's men being a feminist.
Yeah, that's it. And it's all about what is it in service to, too, because when, in my sports example, what men are doing is actually to the benefit of themselves and the men on their team and the men on the opposing team. So that means not about women. When men form a unit in a military situation, they are trying to operate at the highest possible level of efficiency, and they are cooperating with other men most of the time. I know women can join, but like you're not going to see that many women in the military. Like, I think it's something like 12% right now, and we don't know how many of those see actual like action. So in like the overwhelming majority of times, it's going to be men cooperating with other men to accomplish some kind of goal. And that means that they have to operate in a cooperative way. But they would call that toxic masculinity too, because they think that the only reason why men join the military is because they want to, blow up the enemies of America, or they just want to essentially, satisfy their thirst for violence. When I would argue, based on, vets that I know and people that I've met, that's not really at the top of their list. It's just like they either just feel a desire to protect their country, or, they think this is the right thing, or they may not have a feeling that they have another place to be. Like, maybe they don't, they're not cut out to be Silicon Valley fucking coders. Maybe they don't feel like they're cut out to be, professional activists. Maybe that like they see themselves as a blunt instrument. It's not really a healthy way to do it, but for some guys it's just like, well, I'm not the smartest guy, but I want to like have a life of meaning. So, and they will just do whatever. I mean, that's like, why do you have men working blue collar jobs like road work or sanitation? Because they're
a lot of that actually does require problem solving. So I wouldn't say.
Oh, sure. I'm not trying to minimize that, because but like, and they find that they get better at doing it too. But I'm just pointing out that I think that this whole piece is coming from this like coastal, comfortable, elitist perspective, where I guess like she just thinks that men just work in air-conditioned offices like her.
Yeah.
So
no, we're going to find out, because I did a search on positive masculinity and I found what she considers to be positive masculinity, and it's freaking hilarious. But I would like to point out that literally she's agreeing with Hawley that bravery, leadership, fidelity, and responsibility are masculine virtues. But at least on a subconscious level, because she's willing to use those to judge Hawley for not being masculine enough. But I think the real problem is that Hawley presumes that he can determine where those things exist, when of course it is Vivian who determines where those things exist. and
Yes.
feminism that determines where those things exist.
Yes.
And I say that this is confused thinking, but it's not on the level of I want power and I want you to submit to me as a man. I'm the one who determines if you are brave, responsible, have fidelity, and are a leader. I'm the
Yes.
one. And
Yes.
feminism is the one that determines that. You don't. Even though I am actually appealing to these virtues to judge whether or not you are a man.
Yep.
So it's like it's all the trappings of some kind of progressive reinterpretation of gender. It's all social construct. But at the same time, what she actually means by saying it's social construct is I'm the one who decides if you're a man. That's what she means.
Yep. Yep.
Well, that's sort of the role that women had through a lot of history, because men define themselves by protecting and providing for women. This is just another iteration of the same old, same old. Anyway,
Yeah.
shall we finish this
Yeah,
paragraph?
let's finish it. So anyway, that means he sees all criticism of toxic masculinity as an attack on men in general, and claims that it's that criticism that creates men's destructive behaviors to begin with. Well, first of all,
They're not destructive.
they could be self-destructive, but they're
Yeah,
not destructive.
self-destructive.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
so you're now casting a really wide net there, Vivian.
yeah.
She's not saying that the feminists blaming men for constructing a society that destroys women, which is what feminists do, and then men saying, wow, I'm constructing a society that destroys women. Geez, maybe I should stop doing that. I guess I'll go watch porn, play games, and be idle.
Yeah. And now she's like, that's destructive.
Well, yeah,
Like,
that's
so
destructive.
you can't do that either,
You can't
guys.
win. You can't
do
win
that
as a
either.
guy. You can't win.
And of course,
Not unless you are a billionaire who can provide Vivian
Yeah.
provide Vivian's feminist domestic violence NGO a substantial income. Then you can win.
potentially, yeah, you'd have to like give up 90% of your, profit, your assets.
It's not
But,
like Vivian is inducing this constant state of shame in order to, when men get an opportunity to save women, they just compulsively do it. They just compulsively hit that button.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It all feels very similar to the white nationalist quote, if you're going to call me racist, then I have no choice but to act racist, line of reasoning.
No. Well, first of all, that's not white nationalist. It's just the average human being who's just totally shutting down from your narratives of calling everything racist. It's like, if you're going to call me racist for doing something that has nothing to do with race, but actually, if I think about it, just impacts your bottom line and your control over everything, well, then I'm just going to go ahead and ignore your opinion.
Exactly. That's all it is. It's just, and you apply the same thing to what they call misogyny, and that's what she's mad about, because that what it means is that Josh Hawley doesn't care if you call men toxically masculine, and he's just throwing out the whole talking point and saying, look, we need to talk about men, and we need to throw out all this feminist crap because it's not helping. It's essentially one of the main reasons why we're in this mess that we're in. And she's like, you can't do that. That's like white nationalism. So, all right. Here are some other points from Hawley's nonsense speech that we can probably expect to be expanded into full chapters. Men are getting married less and at older ages. They're being apparently being.
Yeah, it's hard to read because she can't write.
Being driven from higher education and even the military. Meanwhile, he is staunchly opposed to opening up the draft to women because he sure has a lot of opinions about an institution that he's never taken part in.
Oh, another zinger, like another appeal to toxic masculinity to blame. Like, what are you saying here, Vivian? Oh my God, Hawley is not toxically masculine.
Yeah, weird, isn't it?
Yeah.
But also, like, I think we should maybe just eliminate the draft altogether. That probably would be best.
Or draft women. I'm okay with that.
Or draft women, but like, if I had to choose, I'd pick the first one. But again, she doesn't have she doesn't have a problem with them opening the draft to women because she knows she won't be drafted, and she'll probably get out of it somehow anyway. So this is why I think that the drafting women thing is I don't know that it's going to result in a better outcome than just removing it completely. But that's just me.
That's another argument for another day.
Yeah,
okay,
that's a whole other thing. Why are these things happening? You guessed it. It's because the left insults men too much.
Okay. Once again, do you want men to internalize the statement, men construct society for their own benefit at the expense of women? Men oppress women using society. Vivian, do you want men to internalize that? Do you want them to listen to that and say, hey, oh, that's really bad, I should stop? Because, yeah, that's what happens. They stop.
Yep.
Or do you want men, like literally men have two choices in the face of this narrative that Vivian no doubt supports. Men construct society, and in the process, they destroy and oppress women. Well, either men are going to be like, well, shucks, bad for women, I'm going to continue to do it. Or I guess I should stop doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what do you want men to internalize that? Like, seriously, is this not a concept that you want men to internalize? Because somehow internalizing that will be the end of toxic masculinity or something? Well, what happens is that men say, oh, well, society is men's means of oppressing women. Maybe I should stop participating in that. And they may not even do it on a conscious level. They might do it on a purely subconscious level, the level of freaking depression.
Yep.
And anxiety disorders, which is what I see. They internalize this crap and it gives them depression and anxiety. So they don't even do it on a conscious level. They're not choosing to opt out on a conscious level. If you shame a person's identity day after day after day after day, guess what happens? They become depressed and anxious, and they become no longer capable of sustaining the kind of concerted effort that's required to have a job. Why is this a surprise to anyone? And that the most shaming thing you can say to a man is your participation in society, your relationships with other men, your very identity is toxic to women.
Yep.
Unless you change in some ambiguous way. But even if you change in that ambiguous way, you're still participating. You're still somehow complicit in this system of toxicity for women. You don't give men any concrete steps that they can change in order to become not toxic. Or actually you do, sort of, which we'll cover in the next thing, because I'm going to show it to you, Brian. If you don't mind, I'll read it, though.
Sure. Well, we're almost at the end. So
yes,
is it in the last paragraph?
Yeah. Let's get to the last paragraph.
All right. So anyway, she goes on, obviously gets into anti-trans rhetoric, claiming the existence of trans athletes is an assault on womanhood and part of a non-existent war on gender, which is also somehow still really just about men. I don't remember him getting too much into that in his speech when I saw it, but I think that there is, considering the rise of people who are identifying as trans and how much that's gone up in recent years, I think that there should probably be a conversation about whether or not, like, this is simply organic and that, we're just they're more visible because we're more tolerant, or if there's some engineering going on. I don't think there's anything wrong with exploring that as a subject. And I do think that it's entirely plausible that if there is engineering going on, it could be targeting men. I know that there's been like a lot of discussion.
Well, obviously, this is engineering. What Vivian is proposing is engineering.
Yes, right. But I'm trying to leave like a little bit of room for, like I said, as far as the trans thing goes, like I don't really care that there are men playing or trans women in women's sports or, using their bathrooms, because I think that they created the conditions for this to happen and now they have to deal with the mess that they've made. But what I don't like is that it's being framed in an anti-male way as though the real problem is that it's men that are in women's spaces. And so, but I think again, if those guys have been engineered to think of themselves as women, or, and this is something that I've proposed, is that more men identify as women because they don't want to identify as men because of how severely we've demonized men and masculinity. So why would they want to be men? Why wouldn't they basically say, I'm going to come out as a woman because then I can have friends? Then I can like live a somewhat more normal life than when I was just living as a man. And so why
come out as a femboy and I can get laid?
Yeah, like I could, exactly. And I don't think that's a common response, but you're gonna get like the occasional man, and he's going to be like, I'm gonna live as a woman because I think being a woman is better than being a man. Where would he get that idea? But I think that's true. I think that's what happens. So again, is that in its own way an attack on men? I would say yes, but of course she's going to pretend like it's not happening. That's basically this whole article. Nothing that Josh Hawley says is happening, that we can all see is happening, is actually happening. And if it is happening, it's not because of us, even though we literally control the conversation around gender, like for everyone. So yeah. All right. So according to Hawley, basically everything he doesn't like, from vaccine mandates to over-medicating children to outsourcing labor to foreign countries, all falls under the umbrella of a war on men waged by the left. Again, I think that there's some truth to all of that. Like, vaccine
okay.
Okay.
No, we do not talk about that.
No, I was going to say maybe not that. But like, when we over-medicate children, we tend to do it to boys. And we give them medications for basically whatever it is we decided is wrong with them, when I think that in most cases they're just regular boys. So when, you probably know, or maybe you yourself watching this show might have been put on multiple medications because, they thought you might be autistic, or they thought that you had, you wouldn't sit still in class or whatever. But the way the education system has changed, which is essentially to move away from all of the things that boys like and essentially force them to sit down, behave, and be quiet like girls, I think that is the problem. So maybe Josh Hawley is right. Maybe he's saying, look, we can't just like put boys on medication when we don't like the way they behave, because that's what they do. And again, he's made that, I know he said that because I remember that stood out for me. That he was like against the idea of giving like what do you call those reuptake inhibitors? Is that what they are? But basically SSRIs, right? To essentially medicate boys so that they are better behaved. It's I think is awful, and I know because we actually had Sage. You remember Sage Gerard? And
yes, well, of course I remember. It's hard to forget Sage Gerard.
I know. Yeah, he's hard to forget. But he was on a number of different medications when he was younger. And I think he said in an interview we did with him, or did a show with him, that like, he believes that he was transformed by it. And he was still taking medications when we were interviewing him. But like many years later, I was looking through my phone and I saw his number was in there, and I thought on a goof I would just call him to see if he picks up, and he did. And so he has the same phone number, and we talked a bit, and his life is completely turned around. Like he's not on medication anymore. He's married. He's so much happier than he was. And I was just like, oh, that's so good to hear, because I hadn't heard from him in a while. But I think that there is something to it, and at the very least, it should be talked about. But if Josh Hawley says, "Yeah, I think we're putting boys on too many pills," the Mary Sue gets all their panties in a bunch over it. So
because he's blaming it on the left. Well, okay, let me put it differently. I would say that these issues are, in many cases, corporate. Especially corporate government collusion issues. And I'm sorry, you can't get away from it. Once we had the too big to fail nonsense, yeah, that there's corporate government collusion. There's no point ignoring it or saying it's a conspiracy to say it. Where regulatory capture by corporations, I know the anarcho-capitalists are like, but honestly, corporations are government entities to begin with. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, they are.
So when I'm talking about corporations, I'm talking about government entities, government defined entities. So all of this is done by corporations. But what's happening now is somehow the left and liberals have become corporate mouthpieces. Like okay, so in some ways this is definitely corporate regulatory capture, but it's the left that's defending it. And I have no idea when that particular switch flipped, but it did. And now I find myself with the conservatives, the anarcho-capitalists, and the libertarians, and also called a Nazi by the people who I used to think were against corporate insanity. But there you go. And so I wouldn't say that it's necessarily the left that caused these things, but it's the left that's become the attack dogs for corporate regulatory capture.
I guess when I think about like what started us on the road of medicating our sons, I would be curious to see if maybe these recommendations emerged from the education system. Because there's a part of me that believes that that might be how it started, or at least how it became so normalized. Because I remember when no boys were medicated. It wasn't normal to medicate boys, but instead they had other means to like sort of
recess, PE.
Yeah, there was recess, exactly. There was physical education. Like there were activities that targeted boys and their needs, specifically, so that they would be well rested and like good and tired. They got the energy out, whatever. But it wasn't done with medications. And I think that maybe as more and more male teachers were essentially like driven out of schools, because schools are dominated by women now, and there used to be male teachers, like I've had them myself when I was a kid. I think that as more and more male teachers were driven out of schools and more women started taking up those jobs, and even in like the higher level jobs like principals and vice principals and such, I think that there was more of a push to essentially like try and create a calm environment where everyone sits still, listens quietly, and does as they're told. And girls are generally more likely to do that, but boys need a little bit of encouragement. And I don't know, like that's maybe this requires like an investigative, like journalistic dive where people can look at the whole history of the Ritalin and these other medications, where it started, why, and like where is it being pushed. Because I think that it seems to me that when this was starting, it was teachers recommending to parents to perhaps take their child to a psychiatrist, and then the psychiatrist gives them, it's psychiatrists to give you the meds, right? The psychiatrist gives them a prescription for, like Ritalin or Adderall or something like that. And I do think that there's something to it. So
but let's get this done,
Yeah. And then add on top of that the fact that most teachers are feminists. So why wouldn't they do that? So all right, but anyway,
good luck reading the last paragraph. It's terribly written.
Okay.
Vivian, do you have an editor, or do you have any ability to write?
There are no editors. I don't think that that's a position that exists anymore. If Hawley's book is anything like the speech it's reportedly being based on, It will alternate between fact-free, fear-mongering arguments featuring either real but random and totally inconsequential strawman figures who happen to say something critical about men once, and vague, about men once, and vague, threatening culture war hypotheticals that don't actually exist. The culture war is not real, guys. I look forward to never reading this book. That paragraph is literally one sentence.
The culture war is the belief that this culture needs to change because there is a problem with it, and that is that people are racist, sexist, and homophobic and transphobic. So what you're saying is, we don't actually think the culture needs to change, because there are people who oppose that message, not necessarily because they want racism, homophobia, transphobia, but because they think that the solution to those ills is on a social level, not a government regulation level, and not on the level of giving huge amounts of funds to NGOs to do nothing. But regardless, the other thing I wanted to mention is that you are part of a thought sphere that believes that men's primary action in the universe, what they are primarily defined by, is destructive to women.
Mm-hmm.
You don't exist outside of, you exist in a thought sphere that is completely defined by being critical of men. Nothing that you say or do exists outside of that thought sphere for the most part. Okay?
Yeah.
Nothing that you say or do publicly towards men exists outside of a critical thought sphere that is critical towards men. And you're saying critical towards men once. Lady, you're a fish in water. And you're saying, Hawley's saying, hey, look, those fish are in water and they breathe water and they swim in water and they feed in water and they piss in water. And you're saying, how dare he talk about a fish once being in water once? Because fishes are only occasionally in water. You're so seeped in criticism of men that you literally think that it doesn't. I think the moment that you ever exit the thought sphere in which it's based and is entirely saturated with criticism, you will be like, my God, this is an alien landscape that I can barely understand. I don't understand this. How do I exist in a world that isn't predicated, isn't founded on criticizing men? I mean, literally, you just criticized Hawley for not holding to the masculine standards that you say, everything comes back to criticism with you.
Yeah.
Every single thing, to the point where you criticize men for doing A, and then men are like, okay, well, I'll do not A, and then you criticize men for doing not A. Men, it's destructive to participate in society. Okay, well, I won't participate. Men, you're being destructive by not participating in society. Your entire existence is defined by criticizing men, Vivian. I bet if we looked at your life, the majority of your conscious and subconscious thoughts would be about criticizing men for something. And the rest would either be wanting to have sex with them if you're heterosexual in some kind of bondage scenario. I don't want to, I'm not, it's just very common. It seems very common that feminists really like the Gorean lifestyle, shall we say.
Yeah.
Or basic bodily needs or making money. And then everything else is criticizing men. And then you have the audacity to say that, oh, he's just going to point out somebody who criticized men once. Really? The vast majority of the Mary Sue's output is criticizing.
Yeah, I was going to say, what's the Mary Sue then? What?
You take away criticizing men and the Mary Sue becomes one sentence.
Yeah, exactly.
And that sentence is, men are okay except when, and then that's it.
Yeah, and that person who wrote that probably got fired because she was too nice to men. Too forgiving.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Okay. So here I did a search on positive masculinity. This is also by, I believe, the same author, Vivian Kane. Justin Baldoni's TED Talk is beautifully honest exploration of the different sides of masculinity. I'm going to click this, Brian, and then I am going to, so I sent you a search on toxic masculinity. I found this particular article because I figured it would explain what Vivian thinks is positive masculinity. because this person, Baldoni, is expressing it. And essentially, having read the article, positive masculinity is being soft and feminine.
Yeah.
So
sure.
positive masculinity is femininity.
Why,
And also,
Justin Baldoni, why I'm done trying to be man enough. Well, man enough for who?
oh, really?
That's
Yeah,
what the
for who?
video title is. It's a TED Talk or a TEDx.
Is,
No, it
is
says
it
it's
your
just TED.
femboy boyfriend who wants you to be man enough, Baldoni?
Well, that's what I'm
Is that who you're-
wondering. Because, like,
Yeah, like,
well,
who
the
are
thing
you
is,
being man enough for?
why would a man be angry enough to say that they're done trying to be man enough when what it seems to me is the case is that the people who are demanding you be more like a man are probably people that don't deserve that service.
Well, we just got from an article. How many times did Vivian basically say, "You're not man enough, Hawley. You're not man enough, Hawley. You're
Yeah.
not brave enough, Hawley. You're not strong enough. You're not tough enough. You're not responsible enough. You're not enough of a leader." You know, how many times did Vivian actually appeal to what, in another context, if she can use it to again criticize men, she would call toxic masculinity? How many times did she appeal to that in order to condemn Hawley? Like, if Baldini was in a relationship with Vivian, he would not be man enough.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
you know, okay, so this is what Baldini has to say, which is incredibly arrogant of him. I challenge you, that is men, to see if you can use the same qualities that you feel make you a man. You snides the same qualities that you feel make you a man, because, you know, Baldini is above that.
Yeah, of course.
Go deeper within yourself.
He's doing it right. By the way, he's on TED Women when he does this speech, so he's clearly like talking to an audience of probably mostly feminist women. So it's really easy to get those seals to sing. But go on.
Okay, so that you feel make you a man, but of course they don't make you a man, right? Well, obviously Hawley is the most toxic masculine example of what makes, Hawley's list is the most toxically masculine example of what makes a man. Bravery, accountability, that's what responsibility means, accountability, fidelity, that means loyalty, and leadership. Okay, your strength, your bravery, your toughness. Can we redefine what those things mean and use them to explore our hearts? Are you brave enough to be vulnerable? To what? Like, seriously, Baldini, what are you vulnerable to? What does it mean to be vulnerable? It means that you can be harmed by something. What is it you can be harmed by? I guess other men, right? Because you can't possibly be vulnerable to women or society or express those things, because then you would be on our side expressing those things. Are you brave enough to be vulnerable to nothing except other men? To reach out to another man when you need help, to dive headfirst into your shame? Are you strong enough to be sensitive, to cry when you're hurting or you're happy, even if it makes you look weak? Baldini, men who are traditionally masculine, and this is according to feminist research called the Masculiven, are more likely to feel like they can express emotional weakness to other men and cry with other men and express their emotions to their friends, more likely than you. You are absolutely goddamn arrogant to project whatever it is you're projecting on other men. Yep. And then he goes on with his arrogance and his selfishness and his self-involvement to say the following: are you confident enough to listen to the woman in your life? Yes, Baldini, you're the first man ever to listen to the woman in his life. You're the most specialist man of all. Jesus, like, this is a narcissist. To hear their ideas and solutions. Yeah, you're the first man to ever hear a woman and their ideas and solutions. To hold their anguish and actually believe them, even if what they're saying is against you. So in other words, to stuck it up stoically when a woman is hurting you. And will you be man enough to stand up to other men when you hear locker room talk, when you hear stories of sexual harassment? Is that really that common?
No.
Like,
No.
do men
Well,
usually
if
go into the
you're
locker room?
if you're well, okay, let me put it another way. He's talking about like he's hanging out with men in the locker room, and men are in the locker room bragging about sexually harassing women, or are
Yeah.
they like talking about a time that they themselves were sexually harassed? Um, no, that doesn't happen. No, no, guys don't go around high-fiving each other for sexually assaulting someone. That doesn't happen. That's not even like in the land of feminist imagination. They might think that, but that doesn't happen. Because you know why it doesn't happen? Because if a man bragged about doing that, the other men would kick his ass. Because that's the reality of men. So, no, that doesn't happen. Maybe a man might describe an awkward night out at the club where, he like brushed up against someone or got drunk with a woman and then they went back to his place or he went to her place and he regretted it the next day or something. But that's not sexual assault. That's just like human beings crashing into each other and making awkward noises and sounds. That's all it is. It's just
Yeah.
it's human nature.
Yeah. And this is really rare because, and it's rare because when they find these men who engage in any kind of this kind of behavior, they become a national spectacle and they're publicly humiliated because nobody likes it.
Nobody likes
All
it.
right. So when you hear your boys talking about grabbing ass or getting her drunk, this reminds me of that one feminist who went to a frat party and she started filming like the young men and women there. And one of the frat brothers came over to her and said, I think that you should stop because that's really creepy and I don't think you have their consent.
Yeah,
You
sure.
know? It's freaking hilarious. She never learned anything from that. Not a thing.
Of course
Will you
not.
actually stand up and do something that so one day we don't have to live in a world where a woman has to risk everything and come forward to say the words "Me Too"? Oh, this is when "Me Too"
Yeah, it was
was actually
2017.
this is 2017. This is when "Me Too" wasn't completely discredited. I don't
Yep.
know.
Well, I think it probably helped his career to do this little speech. And it's not hard for these feminist men to get up in front of a crowd and criticize men for an audience of women that want to see a man slam on other men and make a bunch of like nasty allegations and assertions and make the women that are watching him believe that he's telling the truth because he has access to men's real nature. There's this like, oh, I'm hanging out in the locker room with the guys, and then he could just say whatever he wants, and women will be like, oh, this guy is a man, so he was among other men, so now we know what men really think.
Okay, can I tell you something?
Yeah.
This guy hits every one of my narcissist warning bells.
Yeah. No,
yeah, like this. I'm showing you this article. I'm looking at them. It's called Texas Extras Needed for the New Movie, The Senior by Justin Baldoni. By the way, man, if you're listening to this, if you're reading this, do not become an extra in his movie. Avoid it.
Yeah.
But I'm looking at this picture of him. I'm like, Jesus Christ. This guy looks like he's going to be the next Hugo Schweitzer.
Yeah.
Yeah, but no, I mean, I don't know for sure. Who knows? It's just my opinion.
I don't know. Well, anyway, that's frustrating. You know what I think the most masculine thing a guy can do that would really piss off feminists is say no to them and then move on.
Just move on.
Don't submit. Don't accept their terms. Don't accept their criticisms. Tell, what? No, I'm not doing it. Fuck you. And then move on. That will drive them absolutely insane. That's why they are so angry at Josh Hawley, because he basically said what he believed. And it doesn't matter if he doesn't have the whole truth or all the info. It doesn't matter. He said what he believed, and he did so unapologetically, and he criticized feminism for its role to play. And they're mad because they want to be able to keep him in line, and they can't because he doesn't care. And so that's what that is like the best thing you can do is just say no. I mean, women
And
can't even take being said no to, but feminist women especially. So,
well, and feminist men
oh
I
yeah,
would imagine.
feminist men get violent. So you have to watch out for that. But yeah, it's true.
Okay. I This is a confused mess, which is what really aggravates me. Her thought process is confused, her writing is confused. It is really in need of an editor in
Mm.
order to clean up a lot of those sentences. She appeals to the very virtues that Hawley has in order to shame Hawley for not having them, which is really bizarre because she's essentially saying repeatedly during this entire article, man up, man up, man up, man up. So she wants men to have a standard of responsibility that she can hold them to without acknowledging that they're being held to a higher standard of responsibility than women. Okay. Well, that's not really functional long term. You
No.
know, that a lot of people are going to check out, or a lot of men are going to check out under that, because if you hold them to a standard of responsibility but refuse to acknowledge what you're doing and instead continue to believe that women are held to even higher standards, it's just confusing.
Mm.
People shut down under that level of cognitive dissonance, and that's what we're seeing. And it's good to see that there's a conservative out there who's starting to perceive that this is going to be a problem, and it's going to be an increasing problem. And here's the thing: women have a powerful effect on men's identities. So when the group of people that says that they are the ones who advocate for women and speak for women and speak for women's needs are saying that society is constructed for the benefit, men construct society for the benefit of women at the expense of men, or sorry, for the benefit of men at the expense of women, they are constructing a narrative of social destruction. Like, what do you think is
Yeah.
going to happen? I mean, you want men to internalize the notion that their actions in society are constructing a society for their own benefit at the expense of women. What do you think is going to happen from that? Like, it's obvious.
Yep.
Something's got to give, either men's mental health or society. And considering that men are primarily responsible for funding and running society, that is basically the same thing. All right.
Yep.
Okay, so I'll double check. I don't think we got any super chats. You guys are really,
No.
really,
Yeah,
give
I
us some
got
super chow love there. Feedthebadger.com/just the tip. And anything further on the super chats?
no new super chats since the last one by Meredith, but we did get a few. So that was all right. Let
Yeah.
me just double
Yeah, that's
check
good.
Rumble really quick. Nope, nothing here. So, yeah, I think we
Yeah.
are good on
Okay,
all
but
of
if
that.
you would like to tip us for this content, please go to feedthebadger.com/just the tip, and we put it through at any time, and we will read it at the next stream. We will get it, and it'll pop up in our Discord, and it does go towards funding the Badger Cave so that we can continue to have it and operate it. So it's really critical that you do take the time to do that. And then once again, it's feedthebadger.com/just the tip. All right,
All
Brian,
right.
go ahead.
Okay, so if you guys like this video, please smash the like button. Subscribe if you're not already subscribed. Hit the bell for notifications so you know when our shows go live. And leave us a comment. Let us know what you guys think about what we talked about. I have a link to the original article in the description. The comments are all cancer because the Mary Sue doesn't really allow for open discussion. They generally go in and they clean out, like, any dissenting opinions. So we don't even know if people have dissenting opinions.
Mm.
But yeah, just like I wouldn't bother commenting on the article because it'll probably get removed. So let us know what you guys think about that in the comment section of our video, because we don't remove comments. And
Oh,
most
I
of,
do occasionally. Like, just
oh, if
some
it's
people who are
spam.
just overwhelmingly negative.
Oh, okay, okay. Well,
I
I
think
mean, I
more like I take a break from them. Like it's every
yeah.
freaking comment is you guys suck. Why haven't you solved the problem of my rights? Give me more rights. What are you doing? Nothing you do is making me have rights. It's like, okay, yeah, I get it. I get it. We're trying. We're doing what we can. What we've done
Well,
is we've tried to create a community and keep this running for as long as we can.
yeah. Well, but I mean, like, again, I go back to the Josh Hawley thing. Like, do you think that he would have told that speech or been writing this book, or do you think that Tucker Carlson would have done that documentary series he did on his show like a couple of years ago if we weren't having these conversations? I'm not saying it's like that he listens to me. I'm saying that our talking about this, not just with each other, but with guests and with other members of the men's movement and their conversations and the people that they reach and the people that they reach that are not, you know, maybe they're only somewhat interested in the content, or they didn't realize this was going on, but they were watching them for another reason. Like, you don't think that that adds that there isn't an effect where people are talking about this more and more and more, and like the manosphere has become like a pretty formidable group of people that the media is, you know, not really able to ignore. I don't think that's a coincidence. I think that you start talking about something important on the internet, and then other people want to talk about it, and they want to talk to their friends, and it just spreads from there. And maybe some things get lost in translation or whatever, but the important thing is people are talking about it. And I think I think that's gotta have an effect. I mean, I can't think of why it wouldn't. So we may not
Yes.
get like the credit for it, but like, I don't know, it's okay. So
No, I mean, and in some cases we do get the credit for it.
yeah.
Like, and we are going to continue to do this.
Yeah.
And it's just what we're going to do. As long as we get supported by the people who view us, we will continue to talk about these issues, and we will continue to be the most consistent voice on YouTube, on iTunes, talking about these issues.
Yeah.
We're going to just keep doing it for as long as we can, if you guys fund us. So that's feedthebadger.com/just the tip, because really we can't continue to do it unless we get the funding, but we have for so long, like for 9 years, and
Yeah,
we
we've
will
been able to
continue
hang
to do
in
it.
there. Yeah.
We're going to hang in there for as long as it can, and I will keep begging and twisting your arms for as long as it's necessary. As long as, well, maybe one day people will finally feel free to say, yeah, I heard it on Honey Badger Radio. What you going to do about it? You know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's entirely within reach. So, anyway, so yeah, leave us a comment. Let us know what you guys think about the article and the discussion. And most importantly, please share this video, because sharing is caring. Thank you guys so much for coming on today's episode of Maintaining Frame. And we will talk to you all in the next video.
Men's right activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.